So welcome everyone to Let's Talk. And I'd like to first of all acknowledge that I speak from unceded Aboriginal land, the land of the Camaragal people of the Eora Nation. And I'd like to pay my respects to the elders, past, present and emerging, and to any Aboriginal people who may be with us tonight or at some point watching this in the future. And I'd like to welcome all of you too. Tonight, in case any of you weren't here last week I talked about the invisible wound, and the invisible wound being trauma. As I was just saying to May, the recording of all of these sessions should be up on the site. They all go to the site straight after we finish the session. So if you find they're not on the site, I think the best thing to do is contact the Australian Virtual Centre, contact Mansi, and she will let you know what's happening, or I'm not sure what the system is for getting it up on the site, the recording. But definitely these are all recorded, these sessions. And so tonight I'm going to talk about healing very importantly, about healing the invisible wound. And one of the rather unpleasant realities of life today in our lifetimes is that a huge number of people do experience trauma at some time in their lives. I think it would be very difficult in our time to get through life and not experience trauma. And so I feel that this is a very important subject, given that our world seems to be becoming increasingly insecure, and all kinds of things are happening. And so that sense of security that we perhaps once had may not be feeling quite the way it used to. I know that if you have been studying the knowledge of Raj Yoga, you will have a wonderful lens for looking at everything that's happening, and that it's not going to unnerve you, shall we say. That it enables us, as long as it's accompanied by meditation, a real practice, a real daily practice of meditation. None of these things should be shaking us or upsetting us. Still, things can happen, and I speak as somebody myself who has been very, very traumatized through my work. And I know what terribly unpleasant and challenging thing trauma is to deal with. And so that's why I'm talking about it. I think it's important. I think it's a very important topic to address. And, I've been talking a lot about energy in these sessions, because we are energy and everything is energy. And trauma is something that really affects us energetically. And because it affects us energetically, it then affects us emotionally and physically. It is inevitable. that the psychological, the mental, the psychological will affect us emotionally, or the emotional, because trauma does happen to us. It is at its core something that presents to us. It's our reaction, our emotional reaction to perceived danger of some sort. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about the hummingbird, which is a nice analogy, because they're tiny, tiny little birds, and their hearts beat incredibly fast. And the rules of zoology dictate that for a creature their size, with a heart going thunderously, that their lifespan should be very, very short. But actually, that is not the case. They live to about 5 times they have about 5 times the lifespan that the biological and physical indications would suggest. And why is that? So it's thought to have something to do with the resonance of their humming, because they vibrate. Whilst they're hovering, they vibrate at 50 hertz. And resonance affects this nerve in our body. It's the biggest nerve we have in our body, and it's called the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve runs from our brain stem, and it runs down the neck, and it comes down to every single organ in our body. And you just think of it as a neural highway running throughout the length of your body. And so what has become clear, and this is, I think, something that's a more recent development in terms of our knowledge of working with trauma, it's clear that stimulating the vagus nerve and improving what is called vagal tone can enhance our physical and mental health. So stimulating the vagus nerve, and I'm going to talk about how you do that. It's not hard. You can do it yourself. It can improve everything, including your lifespan. And the vagus nerve is often referred to as the self-care nerve. It's also been referred to as the future of medicine. So it's such an important discovery through neuroscience. And so it could hold the key to an astonishing number of modern ailments. And so learning to utilise its powers is important, certainly for anyone who's experienced trauma, but people who experience migraine, who experience other health issues, quite a wide range of health issues. And so let me just talk a little bit about the vagus nerve and what has meditation got to do with this? Well, vagus is a Greek word, and it means traveller or wanderer. And so the vagus nerve just sort of travels and wanders through the body, and it takes in just about everything as it goes. It goes to everything. It begins in the brain stem, and it heads down into the front of the neck via the carotid artery sheath. And so it travels into the body, passing the cardiovascular system, the digestive system, the reproductive system, and every other organ. And so it takes readings from each and passes on messages from the brain. And so it's considered this neuronal superhighway. As the largest nerve in the body, it covers a huge amount of ground. And there's little going on in your internal organs that the vagus nerve is not involved in. So, interestingly, it provides an alternative link between the brain and almost every part of our body. And so sometimes the nervous system is thought of as a single entity, but it consists of many interlocking elements. You know, there's so much integrity in the design of the human body. It is an extraordinary wonder, the creation that is a human body or the body of an animal or whatever. And so the nervous system consists of the brain, the spinal cord, and the spine is also a very important part of the nervous system because the nerves branch out from the spine also to all parts of our body. Excuse me. So the autonomic nervous system is made up of it has three main elements. And it has the sympathetic nervous system. And the sympathetic nervous system, as I explained last week, is our fight or flight mechanism. It's our alarm system for danger. And so if there is a perceived danger, our alarm system will go off before we've even had time to create a thought about it. We get the feeling. And so that will put us into fight or flight space. And we don't actually have any control over that. You know, it's energetic. It happens. We don't have any things to do with the sympathetic nervous system. We tend to not really have any control over. It controls, for instance, our heart rate, our blood pressure, sweating, digestion, breathing, like when we're asleep, and, you know, at all times. And so all of these subconscious, physical, necessary things that keep us alive are controlled by the sympathetic nervous system. And that is part of the autonomic nervous system. And we also have this other thing called the parasympathetic nervous system. And what it does, it calms us down. It's the nervous system that calms us down. So the sympathetic nervous system rings the alarm bells. And when the alarm bells ring, the sympathetic nervous system will increase heart rate. It will pumps up the lungs. It diverts blood from organs to muscles so that we can fight or run. It floods the body with oxygen and adrenaline and stress hormones, and triggers the release of all these hormones by the brain, cortisol, adrenaline, and so on. Put us in a highly alert state, a highly alert, hypervigilant state. And so we also have this other thing called the enteric nervous system. So these are the three systems in the autonomic nervous system. And the enteric nervous system is concerned with how the intestines function. And it has a role to play in communication with the central nervous system. So, you know, when you're in a highly alert state, the digestive system will cease. The organs will stop because everything's going into the muscles. And so the vagus nerve acts as the kind of central switchboard of the autonomic nervous system. And it is essential for survival, for our physical survival. It's the sympathetic nervous system is not designed to remain active for very long. It's like a short burst to get us into this state to move through the danger in the temporary sense. And so when we need it in an emergency, it'll just switch on immediately. And so the parasympathetic nervous system puts the brake on after the danger has passed or whatever. You know, it's like you take a deep breath and you'll just start to relax, and that's when the parasympathetic nervous system has switched on. And you might hear your stomach gurgle because you've relaxed and everything's working again. And the vagus nerve is kind of telling everything what to do. It is carrying those messages. And so once the danger has passed and we're free of this potentially dangerous situation, everything should be extinguished. And so the resources that have been diverted by the sympathetic nervous system will reverse. And so our resources will be diverted back from the muscles and our sensory responses back into a state of relaxation. So stresses of the modern age can leave people in a prolonged and highly damaging state of fight or flight. We do live in a very stressful world these days. We do have a lot of stresses. Things are moving very, very quickly. The internet and social media speed everything up. The 24-hour news cycle speeds everything up. You know, energy is moving very quickly now. And people are thinking much too much. You know, all of this affects the collective consciousness, which is why meditation is just incredibly important, so that we can pull ourselves out of that and detach from it and manage our own autonomic nervous system, and enable our autonomic nervous system to unplug from the collective energy field. And so we must return the body to a more natural resting state, what's called rest and digest. And this is achieved by the parasympathetic nervous system. But if we're in a highly stressed state, chronic, many people suffer from chronic stress, chronic anxiety, chronic mental afflictions and emotional afflictions, which will keep them stressed, in a highly stressed state. And so stimulating the vagus nerve tends to really activate and wake up the parasympathetic nervous system if it just isn't kind of switching on. And many things happen physically. It affects, it lowers blood pressure. Our digestive enzymes increase, the production of those increase, ensuring proper and sustained absorption of vital nutrients from food. Our immune system gets properly regulated. Stress stops our immune system from working. This is why they've been saying now for years, stress kills. It does. And so hormones and enzymes like oxytocin and acetylcholine are stimulated, which aid the body's general health and improve psychological well-being. Oxytocin is a very important hormone. It's often called the love hormone or the bonding hormone because it's very involved in our emotional and feeling connection to other people. I mean, what connects us to other people? Bloodline is the minor part of the connection. Our emotions are what connect us. So the two others. And so we don't want them to be shut down. We want to be able to feel our emotions. And yes, so oxytocin is very important. The vagus nerve is also able to take readings from the microbiome in our gut. And it triggers responses depending upon the results of its findings. The human body is an amazingly designed piece of equipment. It really is. It mobilizes the things that reduce anxiety, the hormones that create anxiety in us. It reduces them. And so it reduces inflammation in the body. And it has also an analgesic effect. So the vagus nerve just plugs into so much. We talk about the mind-body connection. And so what I would say is the central nervous system is the conduit between mind and body. And the vagus nerve is the main highway of information, taking information. And so stimulating the vagus nerve can really improve the tone, strength, speed, and efficiency of the vagus nerve response. And this can also be tested via an electrocardiogram, which measures the differential between heart rate during in and out breaths. And a high differential indicates high vagal tone. And so for people who are diabetic, or even who are not diabetic, good vagal tone is associated with good regulation of blood glucose, very efficient regulation. So it indicates a much lower risk of diabetes, much lower risk of stroke, a much lower risk of cardiovascular disease, all stress-related diseases. And so a low vagal tone is associated with chronic inflammation, high stress levels, and cardiovascular problems, among other things. Vagal tone can be improved by practicing stimulation of the vagus nerve. And there are a number of ways this can be achieved. And this has not been, the neuroscientific researchers have not done research on how meditation affects the vagus nerve, but I'm sure it won't be long before they do. And it is my belief that it has a profound effect on the vagus nerve. But other ways, apart from meditating, and these are really good for people suffering from acute migraines and epilepsy. There are invasive and non-invasive ways of doing this. And it can be very helpful for people with chronic depression, bipolar disorder, and, believe it or not, morbid obesity. And that's the implantation, which is done through minor surgery of planting a little thing that stimulates the vagus nerve, implanting that in the body. But non-invasively, what can also be done is some exercises. And the results that these get, they're yoga exercises actually, is only slightly less than the implanted stimulator. So, for example, stimulating the nerve through carotid sinus massage has proven to suppress seizures and reduce rapid heart rate. So certain yogic techniques can also really stimulate the vagus nerve. And if you Google exercises for vagus nerve stimulation, you will find there's a woman in America who specialises in vagus nerve stimulation, and they're very, very easy, simple yoga exercises. For instance, one of them is just to lie on your back comfortably with, your hands behind your head like this, lying flat on your back, and your knees in the air, and you just move your eyes to the right for a minute or two, and keep them there for a minute or two, and then you come back to centre, and then you move your eyes to the other side for a minute or two. I mean, very simple exercises. That is just one of them. But I do suggest you check this, Google and check out some of those exercises if you're interested, because these exercises, not only are they very good for trauma, but if you're stressed, if you've got a headache, they can really help. So just like the hummingbird hums and vibrates very, very rapidly, one of the most interesting ways of stimulating the vagus nerve is to hum. Start humming. And it's really effective. Cold water is also very effective. And you just plunge your face for about 30 to 60 seconds into really cold, like ice cold water, icy water. And that produces a diving reflex, what's called a diving reflex. And that also really stimulates the vagus nerve. So that alone will, quickly chill down feelings of anxiety, panic, stress, and body-wide inflammation, as well as elevating your mood. If you've got a large ice pack or a bag full of ice, that'll do the job as well. So let's now talk about the neuroscience and what yogis have known for many, many, many hundreds and hundreds and probably thousands of years is that yoga, meditation is really good for us. It lowers our stress levels, it lowers our anxiety levels, it changes the brain. It changes, really changes how our brains are wired. And if we're wired for stress, which I think is very much the case for people these days, anxiety disorders have now taken over as the most common illness. Anxiety and depression go together. If you're getting anxious, you're going to get depressed. But for some people, the anxiety levels get so high, it's quite unmanageable. And so the effects of meditation are that in 3 months from being, I'm going to talk to you about research that has been done with vast numbers of people, thousands of people, who previously were not meditators. And so they have been taught a very simple meditation like mindfulness, which to me isn't actually really meditation. It's a step towards meditation. But the research on mindfulness is really quite phenomenal because it reduces people's anxiety levels. This is in 3 months of practicing for about 27 minutes a day, people who were previously non-meditators. It reduced their anxiety levels by over 60%. And that, what I'm talking about, when they were put under intense duress, that they showed it revealed their anxiety levels reduced by over 60%. And what meditation does, it actually builds up certain parts of the brain, like there's a wall that separates the two lobes of the brain. Right in the middle of the brain, there's a wall, and meditation makes that wall thicker. And in people who are long-term meditators, this becomes more enhanced. And so what that does is it really strengthens communication between the two brain hemispheres so that both hemispheres work together much more effectively. Meditation increases our what is we probably commonly refer to as our grey matter, which peaks at about 25 years of age, and after that it decreases. So it's at its greatest when a person is about 25, and then it decreases and decreases and decreases. And people 60 and over who are long-term meditators were found to have as much or more grey matter as than a 25-year-old. So meditation kind of keeps the brain young. It promotes the regeneration of brain cells, which up until not terribly long ago was thought to be impossible. But meditation regenerates and it improves so many different parts of the brain, like the hypothalamus that registers that our fight or flight system, that, you know, that's where our alarm system is. That's what kind of goes off. And but meditation will shrink that organ in the brain to a very small percentage of its original size. I mean, it really is quite remarkable what the research has shown us. And what the research has done is prove what yogis in India who've been meditating all their lives have known forever, but they couldn't prove it scientifically because the science wasn't there, it wasn't in. But this is what the neuroscience has shown us, which is quite remarkable. And so there is, you know, I did talk last week about a number of exercises that we can do for trauma, and taking less than 6 breaths a minute and having a long out breath. This is why mantras, chanting a mantra is really, really good for making us very calm and reducing the effects of stress and anxiety. We keep doing it. It's a permanent effect, but we do have to keep doing it, or the brain would become vulnerable again to stress. But these things, meditating and chanting and all of these things, have an extraordinary effect on us physiologically and on the brain. We know that the brain is a very flexible and plastic. Neuroplasticity is, the common term. And, what we do, everything we do affects our DNA. And, I have talked a lot about energy because we are energy. And our energy is in every atom of our body. Our energy goes from the, from the limbic brain, which is sort of through here in the center there, and it gets fed, that spiritual energy gets fed to the heart, and it gets pumped around to every cell in the body through the blood. Every atom in our body receives life force energy from the soul via the circulation. And the heart gets a huge feed of that energy. And so we are energy. That's what we are, life force, energy. And energy vibrates at a particular frequency. I mean, for all of us, it will probably be different. And our vibrational frequency, when we meditate, excuse my phone ringing, please. When we meditate, our vibrational frequency is altered. And let me just get rid of that. Sorry about that, folks. Let me just get rid of it all together. Done. Now I've lost my track. Yes, a vibrational frequency. And so meditation alters our vibrational frequency. And it, when I first started meditating, my consciousness really opened. I could see people's vibrations. I could actually see them. And I could see when I went to the Raj Yoga Center, I could see the sisters' vibrations. And they were very, very fine, very, very fine indeed. And they went up. But out in the street, I'd see someone in the street and I'd see, you know, some guy who maybe was doing a lot of drinking or something, I don't know, eating a lot of meat, whatever. And the vibrations would be very coarse, like this. Very, very coarse, and they would go down to the ground. And so our vibrational frequency gets really raised through meditation. And so if we have trauma, to be able to raise our vibration is very important, because trauma can pull us into a much lower frequency and affect us very much emotionally, mentally, and physically. And so having some knowledge around this, I think, is really important, both for ourselves and people we know. And the other thing is that if we're in a collective, a family, a group of people, whatever, we can change the energy field in that group energy field, in that collective energy field, ourselves, by really raising our own vibration. And so, if I'm with people who are traumatized, and I have been, I work in mental health area, and I've been around people who are very traumatized and who have terrible anxiety and obsessive compulsive disorders and things like that. And they have just wanted to, they've said, just sitting with me really calms them down. And that's just, a side benefit of my meditation, that it can really, just my presence can really help to calm somebody else down. That's worth remembering as well. So not only does it help to calm me down if I need to be calmed down, but it helps others. And, quantum physics, all of this changes our DNA. Trauma and anxiety change our DNA. And meditation changes our DNA. And what one of the things that the quantum physicists have done is they've taken a piece of a person's DNA, and say the person was in Los Angeles, and they've flown that piece of DNA over to New York, which is, 3,500 miles away on the other side of the country. And they've done a test, an experiment with the person, and they have elicited a certain mental, emotional state in them, which has caused them, to change, their emotional and mental state to change. And when they've checked with that piece of DNA on the other side of the country, it has also changed in response, although it's 3,000 miles away. Isn't that extraordinary? And, this is energy. I often used to sort of think, the Hindus offer Borg, have this practice of offering Borg. And so they cook food in remembrance of their deity or their god, whoever that may be. And then they take a little bit of that food, put it in a little container, and then they go and offer it to their god, and which might be, God as we understand God in the West, or it might be, whoever. and then they go and eat the food. But of course, when they've meditated over that little container of food, they have changed everything on the stove or in the oven. No matter how much there is, all of it has changed, because this is how energy works. And so this is the remarkable thing, is that one very calm meditator, that just their presence can really help the collective energy field to calm down. So I hope that's making sense. So before we finish, do we have any questions? And if anyone wants to ask a question, it'd be really nice if you turned your cameras on, guys. It's very anonymous when there are just this bunch of names. Oh, that's nice. Now I can see you, Lydia. Oh, even nicer. I've got 4 faces. So does anybody have a question? You'll need to unmute if you do. No questions? Okay. In that case, let us have some meditation before we finish. So I am going to just speak a few words, and we'll also have some silence. And I won't play any music because Zoom doesn't do music terribly well, I'm afraid. Okay, so nice deep breath. Breaths, deep breaths, nice deep breaths down into the diaphragm. Filling yourself, your body with oxygen. Some nice slow deep breaths. And letting go of the day. Letting go of the world. Letting go of your thoughts. Just allowing yourself to come into a tiny point of awareness inside. And just breathing into that tiny point of awareness that you are. Breathing into it. And filling this tiny point of awareness that is you. With air, with oxygen. And just allowing that very gentle background rhythm of breathing. Deep breaths with long out breaths. To come into that tiny little point of awareness that is you. And just breathe into that and just lean into that, relax into that. Just allow your awareness to breathe. Knowing that as I relax, everything in my physical body is becoming very, very calm and still, slow. This is very good for the body. In this state of calmness and stillness, I'm immediately plugged in to my inner healing ability. I connect with the true self, the soul. And move through the doorway of my heart into the river of silence, where I connect straight away with the Supreme Soul, who is here waiting for me. Waiting to embrace me. And I merge into the river of love, into the stillness and the silence. And the peace. I go deeper and deeper. Feeling myself with light and love and power. Shanti.
Shanti. Thank you, Judy.
Thank you all very much.
That was really great. I'm still trying to process it. That's why I've got no questions. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Have a
See
good
you.
week.